Hello, everyone. Good to be back to Brewing Knowledge. It's lovely Friday evening. We have plenty of rain in Dehradun. It's nice and green. I'm so happy to be back walking in the garden because the garden is really looking up. We've planted a lot more trees in the last 2 days. We planted lots of bamboo. So essentially, the idea of using bamboo as a front towards the wall of the house, which is along the road, is to get a sound barrier. So we are trying to create a sound barrier with bamboo. So bamboo has properties it can absorb sound. So we are working on that. So I thought I'd just add some fun to this session. Before we go ahead, I want to share some two interesting things with you. And what we share here, we expect will add value to your life. We have actually today posted on the website and in a lot of places, we have released what we call the Good School Alliance Comprehensive Review. It may be a good idea for you to go through it and understand why you are here. You are not here because your school told you to come here. You're not here because you feel obligated to come here. You are here, you are committed to your personal and social development. You are here, you are committed to your professional learning. You are here as a part of the Teachers Academy program for educators and teachers. So have a look at this report. It's on the website schooloducation.com and the tab is Impact. So the tabs are Good Schools, Program, tab what I'm calling will be menu on your phone. The Joy of Learning, Impact, Join and About Us. Second, I want to mention about Join. Please appreciate we have to run the foundation sustainably. And we run with contributions from schools, businesses, and partners, which are 25,000 an annum. At My Good School, we get contributions from schools as well as individuals who join directly. In Brewing Knowledge, we expect teachers invest a little on their professional learning because we do reasonably work hard. So we give you access to Fridays and Saturdays, not Thursdays anymore. We need to correct this. I'll get that done. And all it's so easy. Just go here and just send across your love and fresh air. That's all we ask for. And for all the work we do, you can even, I'm sure, spare 3,000 rupees for the year. On top of that, we give you a certificate for attendance. We give you a certificate for reflection and attendance, honestly. So do have a look at these resources. I don't have much to add here. I just wanted to introduce these things to you. So thank you again. We are back in the session. I am going to make it exclusively video for our end and put off all the other videos, please. So what we really want to read today, we are reading Kamla Mukandaya's book. Kamla Mukandaya's book. I will go to my library now. Here we are. What did you ask at school today? A handbook for child learning. So today we're going to talk what is brain, what is evolution, and what does schooling do to the brain. It's interesting to figure that out. Because, why do we go to school? I often ask you that question. And essentially, we go to school for brain development. And brain development happens because of experiences. It doesn't happen because you make them read after you. No, it happens more because of experiences. And how experiences shape your growth, we try to figure out in this book. Brain, evolution, and schooling. Look at the graphic there. It's a graphic about synapses. A basic biology, when we read that neurons, how they transmit electrical impulses, how do they convey information. The basics of brain anatomy are learned by most of us in high school. We know that the brain consists of special cells called neurons that transmit information in the form of electrical impulses. In fact, neurons are distributed throughout the body to transmit sensations to the brain. But the work of 100 billion neurons within the brain represents a fascinating mystery in ways that we are barely beginning to understand. These neurons give rise to attention, perception, memory, reasoning, intelligence, creativity, quite a feat. So now you know what the neurons do when they transmit information. जब आप मीनाक्षी मैम आप यहाँ पे हैं मनीषा anyone here from Arthur Foot Academy?
The Meenakshi ma'am, I saw she's there.
Okay, so I can read in English today. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm here, and so is Swati. I saw Swati over here.
Okay. So Meenakshi ma'am, you may need to help me to explain to them some of the things because I tend to read the chapter in English today. The chapter is that okay with you?
That's okay with me. That's not a problem.
Thank you. Structure and function. Suppose you wanted to understand how some complicated machine works. You might take it apart to closely examine its inner workings. This method works well for clocks, bicycles, and cars. But with human brain, things are a bit more difficult. You can't open a human brain to examine like that, a working brain. When you open the bonnet of a car, you can easily distinguish several different parts inside. Even if you're not familiar with the names and functions, when you look at the brain, however, it is harder to see the divisions. At first glance, it appears to be a solid mass. Closer examination reveals odd shapes and structures that we could call parts. Very interesting graphic here. So, inside the brain of the car. Just as in a car, we would expect the different parts of the brain have different functions, and to the great extent this is true, some brain parts are older in our evolutionary sense. That is, we share them with most animals, including reptiles and fish. They have names like corpus callosum, basal ganglia, medulla, and cerebellum. The various functions they serve include reflexes, regulating breathing and heartbeat, coordinating fine and gross movements, regulating sleep cycles and hunger, and much more. One large section of the brain is its outer covering, called the neocortex. In some of our earlier reads, I'd explained people that how the neocortex today has expanded into the cloud. That's metaphorical, but with us using more and more technology, you will see what I'm trying to explain. A lot of information which you store in your neocortex today you store outside your head. It is a wrinkled gray mass of tissue, 3 millimeters thick, and doesn't look very exciting. But this so called higher brain, and it is what sets us apart from the other animals. As teachers, most of us things we want our students to do in school: understanding, remembering, associating, communicating, inferring, problem solving, and discovering are accomplished by the neocortex. Neocortex is the outermost layer. In proportion to the size of our body, we humans have the largest brains. And almost all the increase in size is due to enlarged neocortex. So, neocortex is enlarging. The figure below represents an inner and outer view of the brain. It's a very simplistic figure. So, they've made a cross section of the brain and they have shown this entire area, the large part, is the neocortex. One of the ways in which psychologists have learned to draw labeled pictures such as these is through the study of patients with brain damage. Brain damage in a patient can be correlated with specific symptoms. In other words, we can assume that a particular damaged part was responsible for the particular lost or damaged function. So, how do you understand the functions of a part? When a part of your body stops functioning, then you realize it is because of this fault. It's like a diagnosis. Earlier, the location of damage could only be known through an autopsy after the patient's death. But today, brain scanning techniques can give us an instant picture of the damage. In fact, as scanning methods improve, psychologists are even able to look into the normal working brain. So you don't have to go under the hood. Over more than a century, this kind of research has led to a fairly good understanding of the way functions are divided in the brain. For instance, we all process what we see in the lower back portion of the brain. And we all, with a few exceptions, process language in that part of the brain and lies just behind and around our left ear. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a shot of this picture and add it to our group for you to think. Let me just do that side by side. It really helps when you have the picture with you. So I'm putting in Brewing Knowledge where I put the bookmarks today. So I've added in Brewing Knowledge. Over more than a century, this kind of research has led to fairly good understanding of the way functions are divided in the brain. For instance, we all process what we see in the lower back portion of the brain, and we all process language in that part of the brain that lies just behind and around our left ear. We all process bodily sensations in the narrow tip across the top of our brain and send out instructions to our muscles from a parallel strip right in front of that. We all process and lay down new memories with the help of a small structure in the heart of the brain called hippocampus. So let's take this out also. And so now you have both the graphics with you. It'll just help you understand what we are doing and you can read and check later. These parts of the brain can be subdivided quite finely. For example, reading and writing are located separately from speech and comprehension. And they are separate parts for processing meanings, semantics, and grammar syntax. We know this because there are patients with damage in one brain area whose speech is rapid, fluent, and grammatical, but meaningless nonsense. In contrast, patients with damage in the other area speak in a halting and ungrammatical way, but with the meaning coming across. There are finer divisions. Some patients have difficulty recalling names of living things and food, but not familiar objects, while others can name all the objects except living things and foods. Box 1 tackles the questions of which coordinates action. So, this hippocampus, they've shown you a hippo here. Very interesting. This book is great fun. It's trying to make you understand how we learn or what schooling does. So, to explain you what schooling does, they're trying to explain to you what the brain is and how the brain grows in school. The hippocampus. Meet the hippocampus, a small and fascinating structure in the center of the brain that is responsible for making new memories. Recently, it has become the focus of exciting new research into the learning and memory making. But in fact, it was many years ago that it first came to the attention of psychologists. Most of our early knowledge about this part of the brain come from patients with damage to the hippocampus and its immediate surroundings, together called the hippocampal system. Such patients forget things from moment to moment, the famous short term memory deficit. They cannot convert new experiences into lasting memories. Every time you see them, they greet you as if for the first time, even if the last time you met them was only 15 minutes ago. However, they do retain so called remote memories, which are all the things they had learned and experienced up to a certain point in time. Yet, since they are unable to learn and remember new things, they remain in a sense of stuck at that point. This makes them far more dysfunctional than amnesia patients who can at least begin a new life. Here, an interesting distinction must be made. Hippocampal damage affects explicit learning, but not implicit learning. So, we are differentiating what the different learnings are. If you go back to a masterclass in productive failure, we've also talked about types of learning and how deep learning happens. Such a patient can learn new skills with repeated practice, implicit learning. For example, if you teach him to ride a scooter every day for a week, by the end of the week, he will be able to ride the scooter. But he will have no memory of the learning process and will even be surprised that he is able to write so well after a week. He cannot learn new facts, new ideas, or meet and get new people explicit learning. The hippocampus, thus, areas to be responsible for laying down these memories that can consciously be remembered and verbally expressed. These consist of new connections among events, objects, facts, and context. Quite fascinating, this interesting chapter. The hippocampus is unique in that it records these connections very quickly after only a single exposure, unlike other parts of the brain that requires several exposures and practice trials. Over time, connections in the hippocampus are transferred to permanent places in the neocortex and in the process vanish from the hippocampus. Thus, when there is damage to the hippocampus but not to the neocortex, recent memories suffer through though remote memories are unaffected. The unique way in which the hippocampus functions, continually making connections in response to stimuli and destroying them as they are transferred to the neocortex, suggests that it may be fundamentally different from other parts of the brain. It is believed that unlike cells in the rest of the body, neurons neither regenerate nor replace themselves. This is mostly true, except for the hippocampus. Recent research is showing that in this region of the brain, neurons are produced even into adulthood, which is adult neurogenesis. Neurogenesis means brain development. Perhaps the special nature of the hippocampus job makes this necessary. New neurons rise to record new experiences and probably degenerate as time passes, and the memory is transferred to the permanent neural network elsewhere in the brain. There are more to this interesting story. What do you think are the factors that reduce neurogenesis in the hippocampus? Apart from the normal aging process, a prime villain is chronic stress and the production of glucocorticoids in the body, a chemical released in response to stress. We are all at that stage today. Studies suggest that chronic stress leads to poorer memory ability in human beings. Although this research is a bit new and tentative, perhaps it is not telling us much that did not already know. Any teacher's first hand experience will testify that stress inhibits learning. If we want students to learn, school must not be chronically stressful environment. So it's an interesting message. Okay, so let's see who is the boss. Examining the brain under a microscope reveals the world of activity and complexity. The approximately 100 billion neurons which make up the mass of the brain work on the basis of electrochemical reactions. Chemicals, called neurotransmitters, trigger electric impulses that travel the length of a neuron and transmit themselves to other neurons across tiny gaps called synapses, again with the help of neurotransmitters. Messages enter the brain from outside through our senses and leave the brain to various limbs and organs so that we can act or respond. The number of messages crisscrossing within the brain snowballs rapidly, since each neuron can be connected to 1,000 other neurons. As we unravel the working of the brain, one question keeps coming up: who is in control and where is the control center? Research has found that there is no actual CEO in the brain. CEO means Chief Executive Officer. The working of the brain is nothing but the ever changing patterns of connections between the neurons. And there is no single neuron or group of neurons that is smarter than the rest. The boss is nowhere or everywhere. The brain functions in a special way called parallel distributed processing. First, memories, thoughts, and knowledge are widely distributed across the neocortex. Second, processing in the brain takes place in parallel rather than serial fashion. For example, to activate a particular thought sequence, several thousand connected neurons are firing in different parts of the brain simultaneously. If processing had to be done serially, with a message passing in a sequence from one neuron to another, the time for even a quick thought would add up. There certainly isn't the time for everything to reach one central spot before decisions and actions can be taken. Neuron firing is quite a slow process, between 1 to 100 meters per second. and a second speed of thinking and action shows the brain processing cannot be serial. However, it is true that we feel as though there are someone in charge. Most of us locate that someone in our own heads. The few actions that seem to require exercise of our will, voluntary attentional processing, are associated with the brain area called cingulate cortex. Every time we make a conscious choice about alternatives, search for a distant memory, purposefully select information for storage, suppress emotional responses, or try to suppress thoughts. This particular small part of our brain is active. So essentially, we are trying to explain the structure of the brain and why we behave, how we learn. The structure and function of different brain parts is closely connected to a relatively new area of thinking, evolutionary psychology. For the remainder of this chapter, we will look at some interesting theories in this field as applied to education. The evolution of modules in the brain. The human brain is very old. Humans as a species have been around for just under 3 million years. For 99.9% of this time, they have survived as hunter gatherers who had to cope with a certain range of threats and challenges. The last 10,000 years of agriculture presented a very different set of challenges, and the last 200 years of industrialization, culminating in the computer age, has changed our environment till it barely resembles that of our ancestors anymore. However, human brains and bodies have followed a much slower timetable of evolutionary change over the long period. The process of natural selection required many, many generations to produce the kind of changes that separate us from our ape cousins, standing up, using tools and language, for example. And there have simply been not enough generations for the brain and the body to evolve in response to the rapid changes in environment that we ourselves have created in the last few centuries. For this reason, psychologists John Tobey and Lida Casmidos say that our modern skulls house a Stone Age brain. Interesting thought. So we have a modern skull, but brain which has come down centuries. The old brain was well adapted to the world where there was no electric lights, no refined sugar, and no school. For example, our love for sweet foods was adaptive then, maladaptive today. We have really gone way ahead than the sweet we need. According to Tooby and Cosmides, the brain evolved separate modules that successfully met the challenges of those times. For instance, one to tell us what is edible, one to guide us who will make a good mate, one to help us communicate via facial expressions, one to learn grammar, recognize faces, make spatial maps, and so on. Even processes such as memory, reasoning, decision making, and learning were specialized to fit the context faced by our ancestors. Today, we still carry these modules around in our heads, even though our environment presents us with different challenges. Thus, even today, logical reasoning is much better for us in social situations that our Stone Age ancestors must have faced. Our recognition memory for faces is much better than for words. So you see how you can recognize faces than words. Children find learning the rules of spoken language much easier than learning the rules of spelling or written language. Moreover, we do not carry around modules suited to our current environment, such as one of literacy, one for computer programming, and one for quantum physics. This has, as you can imagine, some implication for education. So now we are coming to how the brain has adapted to the current education needs, how it was originally designed, and what is being made to do. So there is something known as inanate and inanate learning. Let's understand what are these two forms of learning. So why we are doing this book? This book essentially explains how we learn. And I think that's important before we decide what to learn. How we learn is the crux of this entire chapter. David Gary is another psychologist who writes about modularity, and he describes a very interesting theory. As we have said, any species will evolve modules to help meet its own unique challenges. And for our ancestors, these challenges fell into three broad categories: physics, biology, and psychology. For successful adaptation, humans needed to navigate in a three-dimensional world of physical objects, understand trajectories, judge movement, and mentally represent and manipulate objects, crucial for tool use. Classify flora and fauna with edible, inedible, medicinal, and prey predator. Navigate a social world, especially since they lived in groups. Recognize faces, read facial expressions, recognize skin, divide the world into in and out group members, use language, and infer other mental states. These areas of human knowledge and skill can be called folk physics, folk biology, and folk psychology. The word folk is distinguished it from the formal knowledge we learn in school and beyond. A child develops these three areas of expertise in a natural way without any special effort put in by adults. Gary has attempted to list the modules and make up these areas of skill. For some of these modules, specific brain sites have actually been found. For example, parts of the parietal cortex and hippocampus are involved in mental representation of physical space. Parts of the posterior neocortex, the outer portion, are involved in the ability to name living things, but not non-living things. Parts of the fusiform gyrus and the prefrontal cortex are involved with face perception. Don't worry about those technicalities, don't let them bother you. When you read a book, understand the design behind it. So often when we read, we get carried away that, oh, this is too technical. Don't worry, just read on. Whatever you pick up and whatever you design, your brain will register and it will come to you when you need it. So we have a triple PhD child here today. Among tribal people who do not have a formal education, we find knowledge and skill in these three areas very well developed. Tribal cultures are well known for the depth and sophistication of their knowledge about plants and animals in their environment. Similarly, they're highly skilled in social aspects of living together and cooperating with each other, and rules of kinship, hierarchy, status, and relationships are well organized. They're also highly skilled in their use of domestic tools and weaponry. Psychologists have shown that children, too, before they enter school, have already developed fairly rich folk theories in biology, physics, and psychology. But we ignore these learning completely and attempt to supplant it with a school curricula. In a way, we could call these innate skills. Here, the word innate does not mean that the one is born with the knowledge already present. Of course, that is impossible. Rather, it means that a part of the brain is wired to make certain connections to learn certain things. Language works in this way. It is innate in the sense that babies are programmed to learn any language on earth. It is not inanimate in the sense that they already know a language when they are born. At this point, you'll wonder, is there a inanimate learning? Can we humans learn things we were not programmed to learn? We have talked about several inanimate forms of learning. Now, as teachers, we quickly realize there is little, if any, overlap between traditional school curriculum and this kind of learning. And yet, many children manage to go through several years of schooling and get certified as having learned several non inanimate skills. Inanimate skills are reading, writing, calculus, Kepler's law, classical music. How is this possible? When we look at animals and what they can be trained to do, even the most striking examples of trained animal behavior pale in comparison to the breadth and novelty of what a human toddler can learn. There is something different about the human brain, and it is this: the human brain is actually specialized to learn non inanimate skills. So, this is the beauty of the human brain. Human brain can do reading, writing, calculus, Kepler's law, and classical music, teaching a particular human skills. So now we are coming to human skills. We gave you the basic structure of the brain to help you understand the basic of biology and physics. The property of the brain, the cerebral cortex in particular, that makes non-innate learning possible is called neural plasticity. The human brain contains plenty of spare circuitry that is available for us to make new associations and connections. For Stone Age man, neural plasticity was a great boon to his innovative use of tools and communication. Today, this same neural plasticity, neural means one which connects the neurons, plasticity is flexibility in a way, serves us in learning just about anything because we adapt, right from playing the violin to differentiating exponential functions. Even more important, and what is very different from our own closest relatives, the chimpanzees, human learning can be passed from generation to generation. It is not necessary for each generation to rediscover everything their parents learned. Since humans as a species do engage in explicit teaching, the combination of neural plasticity and the ability to communicate and teach sets us apart as a species. For another way of looking at the same thing, Greary talks about biological primary and biological secondary abilities, which correspond with what we have called innate and non innate learning. Children acquire the primary abilities, he says, through playful interaction with the environment and a lot of self driven practice, which develops these skills to a high degree. Language is a prime example. But this is where education comes in. We can also acquire the secondary abilities. The brain structures can support such learning, but it will require explicit instruction and some forced drill and practice. In other words, we want to learn to play the violin or differentiate exponential functions. We have to be taught how, and we will need deliberate practice in the skill. We come to the important part of the chapter. Of course, school is a place we have invented for this kind of formal instruction in secondary abilities or non innate skills. We cannot get away from schools, but this does not mean that we have to teach exactly the way we do now. We can take into account that the way the brain works and the way child develop, tailor our teaching to that and avoid mismatches mentioned earlier. Learning can be meaningful and fun. We already make use of the brain's amazing abilities to stretch learning far beyond what one could have imagined even 100 years ago. And we could pat ourselves on the back for that, except that education is a painful and basically unsuccessful process for many students. Can something better be accomplished and in a less painful way? That is for us as teachers to discover. So we will discover more now that we've understood the brain. We will see, can we make learning less painful? So these are some references in case you want to read loads of them. You can read more. That's why we are here. That's why we call it Brewing Knowledge. And next time we will do chapter 2, how learning happens. Now that you've understood the basics of the brain, so I will add a bookmark to that. Let me just pop back into the WhatsApp group. I'm offering you this little summary to read, and I'm adding the bookmark. What will be the date next Saturday, please? Next Friday, 11th? Manisha, could you confirm that you have received both the things? The bookmark and the summary?
Yes, sir.
So that's what we had today about the book. Interesting to understand how the brain works. Does anyone have any question here before I read the fun part of today, the story from the book which we're all wanting to read? Any question, anyone? Jugjeep sir, good evening. Hope you're well.
Yes, all good. Very interesting.
Very interesting, very basic biology, how it's explained, fascinating. And the other day when I told you about this neocortex, how the neocortex is expanding, I'm forgetting the book which I was reading where it was telling that the brain has gone outside. And that's where we talk of what's happening today. Now this AI and Gen AI, whatever's happening, essentially the brain exploding. So that's what is happening. So which means the neocortex will go way beyond. It will go over our heads. We'll be wearing halos around us very soon. So let's read today's interesting story. That's what I'm really keen to read. So let's go back to Kindle and we will go back to the library. So our Kindle library is all here. This is the modern way of showing you a library. So we will open our Rumi book and the fun part of the day. This is a very interesting story which we're going to read today. Merchant and parrot. Do you get the screen on the story on the screen, please? Can anyone
Yeah.
confirm?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
lovely.
not.
So, merchant and parrot. Many years ago, a Persian merchant was given a beautiful parrot as a gift by an Indian trading partners. He kept the parrot in a formidable cage where he could catch her and listen to her melodious song every day when he rested after long hours of work at work. The time of the year came when he normally traveled to India on a buying trip, and as it customary, he asked his household help what they want him to bring back as gifts for them. Each person asked for something close to this, his or her heart, and so did the little green parrot. So हम लोग तोता रखते हैं ना अपने जंगले में, और जो तोता होता है वो परिवार का हिस्सा बन जाता है, उसको सब पता होता है, वो सब देख रहा होता है, और कई बार बीच में वो बोल भी देता है, हमारी बातों में इंटरफेयर भी करता है. हमारे मर्चेंट के पास, जो हमारा ट्रेडर है, उसके पास एक तोता है जिसको उसने एक बड़े टाइट से सॉलिड केज में रखा था ताकि तोता भाग ना जाए. अब जब वो इंडिया जा रहा है अपना ट्रेड करने, अपना सामान लेने और बेचने, तो वो घर वालों से पूछता है कि मैं आपके लिए इंडिया से क्या ला सकता हूं, और तोते की भी बारी आती है और तोते से भी पूछता है. सो सुनिए अब तोता क्या कहता है. माय डियर मास्टर, माय हार्ट रियली डिजायर्स नथिंग फ्रॉम माय मदरलैंड. सो तोता लगता है हिंदुस्तान से था. शी सेड मोरोसली, बड़ी सैडली बोला, बट शुड यू कम अक्रॉस अ ग्रुप ऑफ पैरट्स लाइक माई सेल्फ, अगर आपको मेरे जैसे कोई तोते मिले, would you please convey my greetings to them and tell them that I'm trapped in a cage in Persia and I miss them terribly. आप उन तोतों को बोलना मैं पर्शिया में एक जंगले में फंसा हूं और मैं उनको बहुत मिस करता हूं. Ask them whether they think it's fair that they are flying freely throughout the land while their cousin is slowly dying in captivity. आप उन तोतों से पूछना, वो तो उड़ रहे हैं पंछियों की तरह और मैं यहाँ घुट घुट के मर रहा हूं. I beg you to ask them on my behalf for advice on how I should reckon my situation. आप उनसे पूछना इस मेरी मुसीबत का हल क्या है. I hope it is good for everyone the way I'm narrating it.
Yes, sir.
Meenakshi,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
will it help your audience also?
Yeah, it will. They'll understand it.
Yeah, so whole idea of this is a special part of our Brewing Knowledge Friday, specially curated. हम आप सबके साथ मिल के आगे सीखना चाहते हैं जितना आप हमारे साथ सीखना चाहते हैं. और मैं चाहूंगा ये जो कहानी है, और मैंने आज मनीषा को सेशन के शुरुआत में कहा था, ये कहानी हमारी पीस ऑफ रिफ्लेक्शन बनेगी. और इसी के बारे में अगर आप कुछ लिखना चाहें, आप प्लीज व्हाट्सएप में शेयर कीजिए. आप मीनाक्षी के साथ शेयर कीजिए, मनीषा के साथ शेयर कीजिए, कुणाल, किसी के साथ शेयर कीजिए. हम कोशिश करेंगे कि आपको क्रेडिट देके आपके ख्यालात पोस्ट करेंगे. The merchant didn't think much about the parrot's demand, but promised to find the birds and deliver her message exactly as she had voiced. So, merchant ने बोला, चलो मैं करूंगा जो कर सकता हूं. Once in India, he diligently tended to his business, but did not forget the promise of gifts for his servants or the parrot's message. अब इंडिया में उसने गिफ्ट्स भी कलेक्ट किए, उसको तोते का मैसेज भी याद था. One day, traveling from one town to the next, he happened to come across a group of parrots chirping noisily in a forest. अब उसको जंगल में एक तोतों का झुंड मिल गया. He stopped his horse. उसने अपना घोड़ा रोका and delivered his parrot's message faithfully. और parrots को जो संदेशा लाया था उसने दिया. But before he could finish, one of the parrots began to shiver uncontrollably. उसकी अभी मैसेज खत्म नहीं हुआ था, एक तोता मुसीबत में फड़फड़ाने लगा. falling off the branch, and he had been perched on and suddenly died. मतलब वो गिर के मर गया. The merchant ran to save the parrot, but the little bird looked perfectly dead. He became distraught, feeling overwhelmingly guilt that he had caused the poor bird's demise unnecessarily. मेरे वजह से तोता मर गया क्योंकि जो मैं कहानी बता रहा था. He wondered whether the fallen bird was related to his parrot and had literally died from grief about his trapped cousin. उसने सोचा क्या इसने जो इसका कजन पर्शिया में है उसकी कहानी सुन के इसका दिल थम गया और मर गया. Was it not true that the human tongue is like an uneasy aggregation of rock and iron, which when struck against each other can spark off a fire? आपकी जबान पत्थर और लोहे का काम करती है और कई बार जबान से जो पत्थर और लोहा निकलता है उससे आग निकलती है. He regretted having encountered the parrot's message, but there was nothing he could do now, so he continued with his duties until he finished them up, and then he returned home. Upon his arrival, he distributed the gifts that each servant had asked, but said nothing to his parrot. The bird, who had been impatiently waiting the response of her mates, grew increasingly impatient, and at last couldn't hold back any longer, asking the merchant, "So, where's my gift? Tell me, and what did you see and hear from the Indian parrots?" तोते ने उत्सुक होके पूछा कि आप क्या सुन के आए हो हिंदुस्तानी तोतों से. I'd rather not remember, said the merchant somberly. Merchant ने बोला, मैं याद नहीं करना चाहूंगा. Master, what's the matter? Why this long face? I told your story to a group of parrots in the woods, he said reluctantly. But before I could finish, one of them began to shiver, then fell from the tree and died. I'll never forgive myself for causing the poor bird's death. But what's the use? Once the arrow has left the bow, it'll never return. And so are words that leave our lips. This is an important message. जो ज़बान से आपके अक्षर निकल जाते हैं वो वापस नहीं आ सकते. But before the merchant could finish his sentence, the little parrot fell from her perch and dropped dead on the floor of the cage. The merchant could hardly believe his eyes. He burst into tears, quickly blaming himself for causing yet another innocent death. He became hysterical, cursing and repeating, not comprehending why all this was happening. He walked back and forth, staring at his bird, who lay motionless on a heap of leaves on the floor of her exquisite cage. So, पिंजरे के अंदर जो नीचे पत्ते पड़े थे वहां उसका मरा हुआ तोता पड़ा था. He caressed the parrot's feathers gingerly, remembering her harmonious song, which had given him so much pleasure for so long. उसको तोते का गाना बजाना याद आ रहा था और उसको प्यार से उसने अपने हाथ से प्यार किया. After a while, the merchant hesitantly opened the dainty cage and carefully picked up the bird, carrying her to the garden and laying her on the ground where he dug a grave to bury her. Instantly, the parrot shot up to the nearest tree and perched on a high branch, looking contentedly at her former master. The merchant was awestruck, not fathoming the secret of the words he had uttered. My darling bird, I am thrilled to see you're alive and well, but tell me, what did I say that prompted you to emulate your cousin in India? Tell me your secret now that you are free. The parrot was no relation to me, but by his action, he taught me how to free myself, confessed the jolly parrot, without actually speaking. He helped me understand that my imprisonment was due to my beautiful song, my talent for entertaining you and your guests. My precious voice was, in fact, the cause of my servitude. By this action, he taught me that my freedom would lie in the act of dying, in the sense of forsaking my attachment to my worldly talent, which I had prized so highly. The parrot bid her merchant master farewell for the last time and quickly flew out of sight. Jugdeep sir, you want to add any reflection? Very interesting story.
Yeah, well, I mean, in our own way, we're all in our cages.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
It's up to us to break the cage. Is that right?
Yeah, it's up to us because you're in your comfort zone basically, and you're used to it, and so that's what happened. I mean, this was a situation where parrot was longing for something else, so was aware that another life was possible. But many times we're not even aware that another life is possible. We just continue with what what we are comfortable with. So yeah.
That's true. So anyone wants to add anything before we close today's session? So you've had two thoughts on how the brain functions. You can reflect on that in case you wish to. You can brew knowledge, you can read more, you can do some research, you can go do the reading list which they have in the book. The book is easily available and it's published by HarperCollins, very easily available. You can just go onto Amazon and order it. If you need help, write to us, we'll get one for you. Do get the book. It's interesting read. You will enjoy it. And yes, these Rumi stories are beautiful. And the 105 we have chosen, we will read them over 105 weeks. So which means our Rumi book will possibly go 2 years. And we hope you'll keep growing knowledge. That's the whole idea of picking up a book and reading it over a period of time, one story at a time. And one story at a time, we hope you appreciate the joy of reading, joy of learning, and brew knowledge for a better world. I'll just go back to the chat box. Good evening. Yes, good evening. I remember reading this story in my Hindi and Marathi textbook. Let us see if it is the same story. Thank you, Ananta. I had a little message which I posted in the WhatsApp chat. Please catch up on the message. And until next Friday, we'll keep growing knowledge. See you then. Thank you for being with us. We are done with today's session. The question for reflection, Manisha will frame and share soon. A recording of this session and notes will be available on happyteacher.in 24 hours. Bye bye. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
You.